And now I would like to introduce our last presenter. Danielle Assisi is a member of the board of directors at Blossom Spiritist Movement in California. Blossom Spiritist Society in Los Angeles, California. Danielle has been an active participant in the Spiritist movement in California for over 10 years and has spoken throughout the United States and abroad. Mr. Assisi holds a Master in Public Administration and is a credentialed project management professional. Danielle lives in Los Angeles with his lovely wife, Nicole. Danielle will be talking about the new Earth's scientific advancement and morality. Please help me welcome Danielle to stage.
Hello everyone, how are we doing? Good. Would you like to take a little stretch, do a little stand up really quickly, make sure you're not tired? Are you okay? Okay. Fortunately, this is the last one of the night. I'm also going to try to make things easier, to rechannel Moses here and reinterpret one of his famous sentences, which is, "Let my people go." We're going to try to do it a little bit earlier and see how it goes. We'll make an effort, and if everything goes out well, we'll have a fun, lighthearted attempt to talk about serious stuff, and maybe we'll end up early, unless we don't. But anyways, when I was asked to talk about scientific advances and morality, I thought to myself, wow, this is a great gig. First, because there's going to be a lot of smart people talking about it all day long. So all I really have to do is take some notes, get back on the podium, and just repeat everything they said. Then it dawned on me all of a sudden that we are talking about the new earth, spiritual awareness, and I should probably put some effort into it. And then I began to realize all of a sudden that, this is actually a really tough job. All these smart people have come before and basically said everything that you wanted to say. And now you have to find something else to say, or at least say it again. They probably said it better than you did, and they stole all your thunder. In my case, not thunder, firecrackers, because I really don't have thunders. But nevertheless, I'm going to ask for your indulgence as we try to take a little trip down the scientific and morality lane. Because if you think about it, scientific advances and morality, we've been talking about it all day long. But if you really, really think about it, you will notice that they are obviously very connected to each other. And that if we pay close attention, we will even be able to see that the slides are not working, which is also a show of advancement. There we go. So what we really want to do is talking about society in general and explore the timeline of human knowledge. You all have trekked quite a bit of space to come over here to be here today. Many of you have traveled quite a bit. I figured I would put you through a little bit more travel. This time over 30,000 years, so don't worry, we won't take that much time to actually get through it. We'll be pretty quick, so that we can see that scientific advances in morality have really been entangled from the beginning. And to do that, we want to go back 30,000 years ago, where we were struggling to survive in a hostile world. Things were difficult for us until we learned to communicate with one another. And when we did that, we were able to hunt as a team and survive together. It was in truth the beginning of society as we know today. This has made a tremendous impact in the way we live today. And that was 30,000 years ago. 15,000 years ago, so half of our trip, we're almost there. See, it goes by quick, I promise you. 15,000 years ago, that's when the next big idea comes about. We decide that we're going to record the knowledge that we have, that we possess in the caves where we live. And all our knowledge starts to get painted there, and that's how we transmit knowledge to our future generations and how we pass on all that we know, which works great until something happens and we're forced to move out of the caves, in which case we have to start all over again. And that's obviously not very effective. Things move rather slowly back then, and that's why it takes so long for us to start to pick up some steam in our evolutionary process. It is literally another 10,000 years later that an invention that comes about in Egypt that really changes the future forever. And that is the invention of papyrus. With papyrus, all of a sudden, we're able to do better record keeping. We can start to store all the cultural information about all the knowledge that we've ever had. And also, we can start to record financial transactions and taxes even. And it is true, that's why it was used. But because we're now able to write things down and keep them and move them along with us, it is easier for us to pass it into other people. And thus other people can pick it up quicker than ever before. And in so doing, we begin to see the rise of the great civilizations. It's not a small feat here that we don't really think about. And another 1,000 years goes by until another great invention is brought to us by the Phoenicians. All the great civilizations at the time have their own writing. They have been keeping track of things, but amongst themselves. It is very difficult for one civilization to communicate with another civilization because they don't use the same alphabet. They don't have the same language until the Phoenicians, which are great traders and communicate to all of them, with all of them, trading with all of them, create this single common alphabet that you can phonetically write things down. So as far as we begin to learn this new alphabet, we begin to communicate with other civilizations as well. So this communication between different groups of people starts to pick up speed, and we're no longer isolated. In fact, if you ever learned your ABCs, you can thank the Phoenicians for that. They came up with that alphabet. Okay, so we're almost there. We've just done basically 25,000 years. There's only 5,000 years left. Not bad, not bad. If we could only do the budget this way. But the next 5,000 years, however, we find a fantastic rate of progress. Because of these great discoveries and accomplishments that we have brought forth as a civilization, we start to pick up speed and develop at an increased rate. And 3,000 years ago, the Greeks, the great creators of our future, come up with something fantastic. They established the first public schools. And knowledge now becomes, it's divulged publicly for free for a lot of people. And they also do something very interesting here. They begin teaching an intriguing new subject, mathematics. And because of mathematics, we have mechanical technology. Because of these calculations and additions and everything else that math affords us, we are able to start developing scientifically. And in fact, the birth of our very own high-tech life, the life that we lead today, we owe it to the Greeks. It was all started there. And we go again, this time for another 500 years, and we see that the Romans take all the lessons from the Greeks and build a powerful and mighty empire. And at the core, at the root of their mighty empire are roads, a system of roads that connects all the known world together so its army can go back and forth. But at the same time, people can go back and forth, knowledge can go back and forth. And this is, in fact, the first World Wide Web. You can tell your sons, now, the Romans did it before them. Don't feel bad about it. But it is a fantastic accomplishment because we start to mingle with each other and life really changes. Now, another 500 years goes by and the great library of Alexandria burns down with the fall of the Roman Empire. And much of our learning is destroyed. Or is it? We find out that a lot of the scrolls and manuscripts that had all that knowledge had already been copied by Arabian and Jewish scholars and taken to other libraries in the Middle East, in essence creating the first backup system. And we are actually able to restore some of that information, allowing us to continue to dream and move forward. And that very method of disseminating knowledge continues for hundreds of years, where people will literally sit down with a scroll and copy a manuscript hidden by Rand so that we can actually get to know more about that information. In fact, it's going to take another click on my remote. It will take another click so that we can advance another 1,500 years until the missionary called Johannes Gutenberg creates the movable printing press. And what today is very basic to us, it is a revolutionary invention. The movable type printing press, just tiny little blocks of metal there with little letters already printed, allows you to put them together and create words and sentences and then press them on a piece of paper, so that the time that it takes for you to now publish and print a book, it is fantastically quicker than before handwriting. So the time that it took you to handwrite one book, you could do thousands of different books. And this has an effect of democratizing information. It's fantastic because now you can get books, you can get that information a lot more easy. And it's no joke when we say that now knowledge travels at the speed of books. They no longer go by handwriting, but you can print them as fast as you can make them, and you can pass them around. And here's an interesting thing about Gutenberg. He did get it because the first book, the one he was really famous for, first publishing out, was actually his Bible. So he already had the intention of disseminating knowledge, and positive knowledge as well. And because of that, not 100 years later, we find the Renaissance taking root 450 years ago. Incredible explosion of innovation. People can now learn by themselves because they can finally, most people, almost everybody, but not almost everybody, but a great chunk of people can actually buy a book now. They are affordable because they are mass produced. And something that we have never really thought about comes to fruition, which is people can pick up a book and learn by themselves. They couldn't do that before. There were no books. You needed somebody else to do that. And because you can do that, you can buy these books, you can also learn about different topics that were not close to you. If those people that were near your village or on your village before didn't know something, you didn't know it either. You didn't have another means to actually getting it. But with books, a great variety comes in, and it's no surprise then that the Renaissance triggers a revolution in arts. All kinds of different ideas, because now we're exposed to our own intellectual buffet. We can choose and pick from different things, we can dabble in all things, and we can start to seriously develop our intellectual hobby. Now, fortunately, this has basically been 29,900 years of progress. But the last 100 years of progress on our 30,000 trip is really a fascinating one. In the last 100 years, we have seen more progress, technologically speaking, than ever before. Yes, it all started with books, but now, within this last 100 years, we created typewriters, which were our own little printing presses at home. We had telephone systems which prevented us from sending notes back and forth. We built railroads that would allow us to travel even faster than those ancient roads would let us. We see radios and TVs bringing voices and images through our living room so that we can get the news, and newspapers are printing, and they're cheap and they're affordable. And we're now sharing more information that is important to us with more people than ever before. And no geographical barrier either. In fact, the very advancements in computer technology, however, do not prevent us from misspelling the word geographical, as you can see. So we gotta do a better job of that. But we'll talk more about that later. But the geographic barrier is broken down. So much so that in 1969, we are able to transmit a communication from the moon when man lands on the moon. And for men to get there, we had to develop a whole new language, the language of computers. We built this huge machinery, which you might not remember, I don't either, but I've seen them in books. Took a whole space, a whole room like this one, just to be some basic calculations. And funny enough, it was not very far from here that a couple of boys in a Silicon Valley garage decided that that should be made affordable for everybody. That computing power. And personal computers have started. And they continue to revolutionize our lives in ways we cannot even understand. We haven't even thought of. And in short, that is our trip through 30,000 years of knowledge. But the question that stays here is, after we've done all of this, we must really rely on poetry, by the way, because only poetry can understand scientific advances and morality. So we call on the poet T.S. Eliot. He said, where is all the wisdom information brought us? We have been able to amass vast amounts of knowledge and gain understanding of tremendous things, but we apply very little of it other than to create our own comfort, to make life easier for us. Don't get me wrong, I am a fan of indoor plumbing and air conditioning, but perhaps there's more we can do with all this knowledge. And we keep asking ourselves, is there something we can do? Is this the right way of going about things? So to make sure, we check upon our own authority, which is Allan Kardec, the compiler of Spiritism, which tells us in the Spirit's book published in 1857, question 780, he asks the elevated spirits that he is interacting with, does moral progress always follow intellectual progress? And they respond, it is its consequence, but it does not always follow it immediately. So this is a very powerful sentence here, because our spirit friends are telling us that before we evolve morally, we must evolve scientifically. That is to say, we must gather information so that we then learn how to use and apply it. But it doesn't mean that as soon as you gather that information, right afterwards, you will know how to apply it properly. And I think that if we look in our own lives, we all have examples of really smart friends of ours who don't make good choices, right? In fact, that's also an example of how we don't make good choices, because we generally try to apply that to other people. We should be thinking about, how about me? Do I make good choices? But nevertheless, this is a very interesting question that we start to think about. And as we think about that, we think about another sentence, which is, we've had all these experiences, but we have missed their meaning. So if we have had so many experiences and we missed so many great meetings and so many lessons, could we go back now? Could we go back for a second and look back in science and find some scientific advances that perhaps can teach us moral lessons? And I've compiled then a list of 173 of them that I would like now to share in detail with you. I'm just kidding, people. Just 5. You can see them. So I want to talk to you a little bit and see if that makes sense. If we have eyes to see and ears to hear, we can remit back to Nicolaus Copernicus, a Polish scientist living in the 15th century. Copernicus did something fascinating for the time. He came up with a heliocentric cosmology. That is, the world, the universe, is based and revolves around the sun, not the earth. Until 500 years ago, this was not a fact. So it was only recent, in the last 500 years, that we actually begin to think about that. And the implications here are quite obvious, isn't it? If the sun is the center of the universe and we are not, we as people must also understand that we are not the center of the universe. Everybody else does not revolve around me. I am part of the process, just like anybody else. Everybody has their orbits. They do go about doing their own things. So we must be tolerant with others. We must understand that everybody else is trying to do the right thing too. It should bring us patience. At least it should bring us a certain humbleness and a certain sense of camaraderie in general. And that is validated by question 913 in the Spirit's book as well, which, by the way, was published much later, but shows again these facts. And question 913 reminds us that selfishness is the root of all our vices. But we don't stop with Copernicus. We go for another 100 years or so, and we find Sir Isaac Newton, an English mathematician. And we all know Newton's 3 laws, and we heard about it. But in one of them, he says, to every action there is an equal and opposite reaction. In fact, physics itself owes its existence, as we know it today, to Isaac Newton. And we know that physics basically rules our lives and the way things interact. But very few of us have actually stopped to think that every action there's an opposite reaction is also a moral learning. That whatever it is that we do has an impact in others, will affect others, and by definition will come back to us. It is mathematical karma, put it this way. Right? So when we do things, we should think about their consequences. We should think about how will it affect other people and what does it mean. We should also know that if we want to find out more about cause and consequence, we can also visit Heaven and Hell, chapter 7. There are 33 items there that talk a little bit more about cause and effect. But clearly, besides a very nice set of a head of hair, we can see that Isaac Newton has something else to teach us. And by the way, I am extremely jealous of his hair. But you see, and maybe that's why he's got a little face there. He's not very happy. But he should be, because he's left us with a great, great, great lesson that we should pay attention to, not only mathematically, but also emotionally, spiritually. We move forward again, this time another 100 years, and we talk about Charles Darwin. We all know about Charles. We've heard about him. And in his theory of the species, we see that he talks about different species adapting to different environments and evolving and changing themselves, and therefore surviving because they've been able to adapt to that environment. And if you look close enough, he also makes a claim for a common descent, that all creatures go back to one original species that branched out and found anybody else. Sure, there's still much debate about whether that is true or not in our society. For now, I'm going to assume that we hold this to be true. And in so doing, I'm going to say that this is also a great moral lesson for us. If our physical bodies adapt, and we know this, and change, why shouldn't we emotionally and spiritually too? Why can't we be open to new situations and embrace change as it happens as opposed to fighting it? We must. If we believe in God, change is good. God will not put us through something that we cannot handle. And therefore, we must have faith in this and understand that everything is connected. In fact, if Darwin had the ability to find out in the Spirit's book, which by the way was published 3 years before he published his theory of the species, he will find in those pages the fact that we find that in nature everything is connected. We see that in question 540. From the most primitive atom to the most sublime archangel, who in turn was once an atom too. So we find not only the evolution of the spirit, but the evolution of the physical bodies contained in the Spirit's book before Darwin published it. And this should come as a great lesson to us. We too must change and evolve. We must embrace this. We're almost there. And notice how they start losing hair as they go along, which makes me happy. Another person that we should talk about, though, is Maxwell. Maxwell was a Scottish mathematician at the same time of Darwin, this time. Not a lot of people know about him. But I am a big friend of Maxwell because Maxwell did something astounding. He basically came up with a set of equations and refining other people's work that explained and helped create a unified model of electromagnetism. What that means is, now with strong mathematical foundations, we can understand how electromagnetic forces act and that they're there. This is huge, people, because this is mathematical proof that unseen, invisible forces exist in our world and can act in our world. In fact, if you have a remote control, a TV, or anything that's electronic, you should thank Maxwell. All that went into calculation to create all these great things. But the implication here for us is huge. Mathematically, he proved that electricity, electromagnetism influence us and everything else, and we are able to predict and control. Then it's no surprise that we will find in the Spirit's book, again, which was published before his work, in question 459, that when Kardec asks, do the spirits influence our lives? And they respond, so much so that they influence your life more than you think. In fact, I'm paraphrasing here, they often guide you. So we must be aware of the invisible forces acting upon us. We must understand where they come from, who they are, and how they affect us. And that in itself is also a great lesson. Last but not least, we have Sigmund Freud. Not my favorite, but nevertheless, a very great missionary for us. Because and this happened in the last 100 years, and obviously there were other people doing great work at the same time, like William Wundt and William James, developing the mind as well. But it's interesting to see that it was not until the last 100 years of that 30,000 year span that we look, scientifically speaking, inwards. Until then, we are committed to finding how the physical world works, but we have never created a science that is to look inside of ourselves to see how our emotional work takes place. And that is fascinating. No wonder that we don't do it, because for the past 30,000 years, as we've been reincarnating, we haven't been used to it. But now we must. We don't have a choice. In fact, if we look at question 919 of the Spirit's book, which clearly was published before him, before his work, we find the Spirit's answering a question by Kardec: how can we do better living? How can we live better? And the Spirits respond, in truth, a sage in antiquity has already told you, know thyself. So we must, therefore, be in tune who we are. Ask ourselves, why do we do things that we do? How come that takes place? But the short end of the stick here is there are a lot of opportunities for us to look. These are just 5 of them. There are many more out there if we have eyes to see. In fact, that's also explained by Spiritism. If we look at the reviews, the Spirit Review, a magazine published by Kardec in 1864, we will find that he talks about the universal control of the spirits, whereby God makes things known in many different places so that not just one person can understand it. That in fact, he can, many different people can come to understand it, so then there's no confusion and the idea lives on. Spiritism explains a great lot to us. And no surprise then that we use this fabulous tool, and by that I mean Spiritism, right? This fabulous tool to understand that it is a body of knowledge. It's a progressive body of knowledge. And this progressive body of knowledge tells us that it is a science to study the nature, the origin, the destiny of souls and its relation to the corporeal world. We can use a Spiritist tool. We can use that to understand the whole of it. We can look back at all these things and make sense of it still, like any other credit card. And now we are dead. Like any other credit card, it's personable and untransferable. We got to do the moral evolution ourselves. Spiritism can give us the tools to understand things. Spiritism can tell us how to get there. But we must ultimately ask ourselves, what type of Spiritists, what type of new citizens of this earth we've got to be. He helped us understand by putting 3 different categories. And we sometimes go through them in our lives. And sometimes we're just interested in the phenomena. We're just understanding the facts. Then we're experimenters. When we begin to move a little bit forward, we begin to see that there is something else out there, but we still are not changing really our behavior. But if we move forward and become true citizens of this new earth, we understand the facts, we understand the implications, and we're doing something about it. And that's what it's left to us to do. To go back and with this new knowledge, with this new understanding, to quote the poet again, T.S. Eliot, and understand that we shall never cease from exploration, that the end of our exploring will be to arrive where we started and know the place for the first time. To understand the whole cycle again and see that indeed there's much we can do. Divulge knowledge, passing it along, engaging with people, and doing all kinds of wonderful things so that we can progress ourselves and have our society progress as well. So it's extremely important that we realize that scientific advancements are not separate from morality in general. That in fact we need both to come together, to be together, and it's incumbent upon us to do that. So that we can create those roads, we can create those connections, we can develop those formulas, we can study the world around us so that we can be happier. And by doing so, help the earth be happier. The new earth, as was said before, is not different than the one it is now. It is just us reevaluating what it is and being much, much happier for it all. And as we go, sometimes it sounds so overwhelming, this task. We need to make sure that we leave with a positive attitude, because we need to commit to ourselves that we can do a little bit more, that we can learn and put all these teachings that we've gathered in our hearts from Spiritism to action. Will you do this with me? Let us pledge to ourselves to, in this year, do a little bit more than we did last year, so that when we meet again next year, we'll be able to say, we've done a little bit more. We've helped usher in this new earth. And let us exit with a positive message of love and deep philosophical knowledge that will come about as soon as the clicker comes. Remember, God loves you. You rock. You rule. And if God is for us, who can be against us? Thank you.